My name is Sandra Baker. I'm 37 years old, and here's how my story begins. If you asked anyone who knew us back then, they would have said my husband and I were a solid couple, practical, steady, the kind of pair who showed up to dinner parties with matching sweaters and a well-rehearsed laugh. I was 37, he was 34. We'd met at a friend's wedding, danced to 3 slow songs, talked until sunrise, and convinced ourselves destiny had tapped us on the shoulder. We married 2 years later in a ceremony so small you could count the guests without running out of fingers. Nothing extravagant, no ice sculpture, no rented ballroom, no fireworks display timed to our first kiss as husband and wife. Just the 2 of us under an oak tree, our families on mismatched chairs, and a promise to build a life together. I genuinely believe that was enough. For years it was, or at least I thought it was, Elias. My husband always liked nice things. He appreciated quality, as he put it. But something shifted about 18 months ago. Not suddenly, not dramatically, more like a slow leak in the foundation. Quiet, subtle, but undeniably corrosive. It started when his college friend Brian married a woman whose family practically printed money. Their Instagram was a highlight reel of yacht vacations, rooftop champagne nights, and weekend getaways that cost more than my car. Elias would scroll through his phone with this distant look in his eyes like he was watching a life meant for someone else. "Did you see this?" he asked one night, shoving the screen at me. The newlyweds were in Japan for cherry blossom season, wearing matching designer coats. "Must be nice, right? Just deciding to go to Tokyo because you're bored." I laughed it off. "We went to Cabo in March. That was pretty nice." He didn't laugh. He didn't even look at me. It only got worse from there. Every dinner with friends, every casual conversation, every post on social media seemed to magnify what we didn't have. The comparisons crept in like cracks in glass. One night, after I got home from a long day of client meetings, I found him sitting at the kitchen island, hunched over his phone. The glow lit up his face, highlighting the tightness around his mouth. I'd seen that look before in sales executives who realize someone half their age just outperformed them in people who feel the world owes them more. "We should go to the Maldives," he said without glancing up. I froze halfway to the fridge. "Maybe next year. Once that bonus comes in, we can—" "Next year," he repeated, finally lifting his eyes to mine. "It's always next year with you, isn't it?" "We just went to Mexico in March," I said softly. He scoffed, actually scoffed. Mexico Brian and his wife just spent 2 weeks in Italy. Private vineyard tours, first-class flights. Real vacations, not budget getaways. That word budget hit harder than it should have. I wasn't ashamed of our life. I'd built my career from nothing, worked through nights and weekends, clawed my way into a stable, comfortable income. But suddenly comfortable wasn't enough for him. "I'm not a hedge fund baby," I said quietly. "You knew that when you married me." That's when his expression changed. Cold, flat, contemptuous. "I did know that," he said. "And I'm tired, Sandra. Tired of settling. Tired of your mediocre income and your mediocre ambitions." I felt something deep inside me tilt like the floor had shifted under my feet. He stood up slowly, deliberately. "You can't provide the life I want," he said. "Then stay out of my way. I'll find someone who can." Every word landed like a shard of ice. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Not because he'd said something cruel, people say cruel things when they're angry, but because he meant it. I saw the truth in his eyes, the truth he might have been hiding even from himself. He didn't see me as his partner anymore. He saw me as an obstacle. I set down the folder of reports I'd been carrying, suddenly aware of how heavy everything felt. The silence, the disappointment, the years of pouring myself into a marriage that now felt paper thin. "Are you serious?" I whispered. "Dead serious," he snapped. "I'm not spending the rest of my life pinching pennies while everyone else lives actual lives. Step up or step aside." Something inside me clicked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, precise click like a lock turning. All the pleading, the performing, the accommodating evaporated. "Good luck with that," I said. He blinked, thrown off. He'd expected tears, a breakdown, a desperate scramble to win him back. He didn't know me as well as he thought. I walked past him to our home office, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a file I had prayed I'd never need. My uncle, an attorney who'd seen too many marriages implode, insisted on a prenup before I married Elias. He'd said it was protection, not mistrust. A safety net for the life I'd built before Elias ever walked into it. Elias had signed it with barely a skim too excited about the wedding to care about paperwork. I dialed my attorney. "It's time," I said. By the time Elias came to bed that night, divorce papers were already being drafted. The next morning, I handed him a coffee and a crisp white business card. He stared at it confused. "What's this?" "My lawyer," I said gently. "We're done. They'll contact yours. Or you can get your own." His confusion morphed into shock, then outrage. "You're divorcing me over one argument." "No," I said. "I'm divorcing you because you told me I'm not enough and that you want someone richer. I'm simply giving you what you asked for." "You're being dramatic," he snapped. "You're really throwing away 6 years because I was frustrated." "You told me to step aside," I said, picking up my keys. "So I'm stepping aside permanently." "You can't just—" "I can," I said, and I have. I walked out the door without looking back. My phone buzzed non-stop on the drive to work. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He'd already said everything I needed to hear. Elias didn't respond to the divorce news the way I once imagined he would. Instead of showing remorse or even desperation, he hired an attorney who advertised himself as aggressive on a website littered with stock photos of gavels and city skylines. It felt almost absurd watching him posture as if he were the one being wronged. He texted constantly in the days that followed, accusations, pleas, guilt trips, attempts to regain control through sheer persistence. I responded just once to tell him all communication must go through attorneys. After that, I ignored the stream of messages ranging from, "You're being dramatic," to, "You owe me a chance to explain." When he realized I wouldn't engage, his mother stepped in, leaving a voicemail that sounded like it had been practiced in front of a mirror. She lectured me about commitment, accused me of taking marriage too lightly, and insisted I was throwing away something beautiful over emotions. I deleted it without listening to the end. 2 days later, his sister appeared unannounced at my office building, demanding I fix the rift I supposedly created. She caused such a scene that security had to escort her out, and even then she tried to twist back toward me with accusations about loyalty and betrayal. I remember sitting at my desk afterward, the fluorescent light buzzing faintly above me, wondering when Elias's entire family had agreed to speak in a single vocabulary: deny, deflect, dismiss, blame. They had perfected the skill long before I entered their lives. I had simply been naive enough to overlook it. 2 weeks later, the mediation date arrived. I dressed simply and professionally, slacks, a fitted blazer, my hair pinned back in a way that made me feel focused rather than defensive. When I walked into the room, Elias was already seated beside his attorney. He looked tired, eyes red-rimmed, as if exhaustion had etched itself into the lines of his face. For a split second, I saw the man I once loved, the man who danced with me, under strings of lights at a wedding reception, and whispered promises about a life built on teamwork and trust. But that flicker vanished the moment he straightened his posture, lifting his chin as if preparing for battle. His attorney began with a rehearsed assertiveness, laying out demands for a 50-50 split of all marital assets, including investment accounts, retirement funds, and home equity, plus $3,000 a month in spousal support, while Elias transitioned back to full-time employment. It was astonishing how confidently he announced these demands, as if he believed they were indisputable truths. Meanwhile, Elias didn't look at me, only at the stack of notes in front of him, his jaw set with a sense of entitlement he no longer tried to hide. My attorney didn't waver. She calmly opened a folder, smooth, deliberate, almost graceful, and slid a thick packet of documents across the table. The prenuptial agreement, she said, her tone polite but edged with precision, signed by both parties 6 years ago. The shift in the room was immediate. Elias's lawyer picked up the document with mild annoyance, flipping through it quickly at first, then slowing, then stopping altogether as the significance of its contents sank in. His brows began to knit together in confusion, then surprise, then something closer to alarm. He glanced at Elias. "You signed this." Elias frowned, with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Yes, years ago. It was just standard paperwork. Why?" My attorney answered before his lawyer could muster a response. "Because it protects Sandra's premarital inheritance entirely. It also protects her premarital business equity and the investment account derived from those funds." Elias's head jerked toward me as though I had physically struck him. What that investment account grew during our marriage. How can it be separate? Per the prenup, my attorney replied, growth of premarital assets remains separate property if kept in designated accounts. Which it was. Silence fell over the room, heavy enough to feel physical. The mediator leaned slightly forward, as if bracing for impact. Elias's lawyer straightened the papers in front of him with a resigned sigh. This agreement is extremely detailed, he said quietly. There's no issue with its validity. My attorney continued, her tone calm and authoritative. The protected assets total approximately $520,000. These are not considered marital property. Elias stared at me, betrayal contorting his expression. You hid money from me. I didn't hide anything, I said. You simply never asked. He shook his head, stunned. We're married. We were supposed to split everything. We will, my attorney clarified, the marital assets, which total approximately $260,000. The mediator added gently, your share would be half of that. Elias blinked rapidly, unable to process it. That's nothing. How am I supposed to live off that? My attorney pushed a second page forward. We are offering a one-time spousal support payment of $18,000. This results in a total proposed settlement of $183,000. Elias looked from the paper to me, disbelief cracking through his voice. This is robbery. No, I said quietly. This is what you signed. His face darkened. You trapped me. It would have been easy to react emotionally, but I didn't flinch. You trapped yourself, Elias. You signed a legal document without reading it because you were too focused on picking out the right boutonniere and the perfect wedding playlist. My attorney placed a hand lightly on my folder, signaling it was time to leave. But before we could stand, Elias's lawyer, clearly rattled, requested a short recess. He led Elias out of the room and through the glass wall. I watched my husband pace back and forth, hands gesturing wildly as he attempted to rewrite the narrative into one where he was the victim. My attorney leaned toward me with a soft sigh. He's realizing that he's not walking away from this marriage with the lifestyle he expected. Their 15-minute discussion ended with both of them returning to the table, Elias red-eyed. And Hollow, his lawyer, resigned. We reject the offer, the attorney said. We'll be taking this to court. My attorney simply nodded. Then we'll see you there. As I gathered my things, Elias finally spoke, his voice trembling with anger and desperation. You're ruining my life, Sandra. I paused at the doorway but didn't turn back. No. You ruined it when you told me I wasn't enough. I'm just finally listening. Then I walked out, leaving him to face the reality he had created. Court battles don't start in courtrooms. They start quietly in the spaces between anger and fear texts. After midnight, whispered complaints to relatives, half-truths posted online. Elias didn't wait long to escalate. Within 48 hours of mediation, his attorney filed a motion claiming the prenup was invalid due to emotional duress and lack of independent counsel. The accusation was absurd. We had signed that agreement years ago with careful documentation recommended by my uncle and reviewed by a lawyer Elias personally selected. But absurd accusations still demand legal responses, which meant more hours drafting statements, gathering evidence, and paying fees. My attorney warned me. This won't be a clean fight. He's angry, embarrassed, and cornered. Men in that position don't realize when they are burning their own futures. She wasn't wrong. The financial attacks came next. One afternoon, while I was reviewing quarterly reports at work, my bank sent an alert, attempted withdrawal exceeding daily limits. Elias had tried to empty the joint checking account. Fortunately, I had already moved my direct deposits and my half of the balance weeks earlier. He still managed to transfer out everything I intentionally left for him, including the extra few $100s I added, so he wouldn't struggle during the transition. The irony was predictable. His lawyer had to return the portion belonging to me after my attorney produced statements proving I hadn't touched his half. The next day, my boss called me into his office. I walked in bracing myself for bad news, wondering whether it was about our new software rollout. Instead, he gestured for me to take a seat. Your husband contacted HR, he said, choosing his words carefully. Multiple times. A hollow feeling tightened in my chest. What did he say? He suggested you were unstable, disruptive, and possibly emotionally volatile at work. My boss gave me a sympathetic look. We've known you for 8 years, Sandra. HR documented the calls and notified him that further contact would be considered harassment. But I thought you should know. I nodded, holding my breath until he finished. If you need time off or help documenting anything, just tell me. We're on your side. Walking back to my desk afterward, I felt a strange mixture of gratitude and humiliation. It was one thing to fight a failing marriage behind closed doors. It was something else entirely to watch him try to poison my livelihood. And still a part of me felt almost numb. Maybe this was what letting go really meant, expecting nothing from him, not even decency. Then came the social media posts. He never mentioned my name directly, but anyone who knew us would recognize the insinuations. Vague quotes about betrayal, greedy partners, abusive relationships, and wolves in sheep's clothing. The comments filled with sympathy from his friends, most of whom didn't know me beyond a handshake at a barbecue. I didn't respond. I wouldn't have dignified it even if I had the energy. His mother, however, took a more direct approach. She called my mother my sister, even my father, who had met her exactly twice, and told each of them a different version of the story. In some versions, I had drained their accounts. In others, I had emotionally tormented Elias for years. In the most dramatic retellings, I had used marriage as a stepping stone to wealth. My sister called me after receiving one of those rants. "Is she completely unhinged?" she asked. "She's saying you hid money from him and controlled everything." I felt a bitter smile tug at my lips. That woman thinks breathing is a manipulative tactic if she doesn't approve of the air you breathe. Ignore her. But the most disturbing escalation happened 3 days before the hearing on the prenup motion. I woke up to a 6-page document from his lawyer claiming that Elias had been subjected to long-term emotional abuse by me and that the prenup was signed under psychological distress. I reread the document 3 times, my throat tightening. It was a surreal experience seeing myself described in ways that didn't resemble my character, my actions, or even my personality. My attorney was furious. "This is baseless. It's defamatory. They're hoping you'll panic." Don't. Still defending myself meant producing emails, screenshots, messages, and even mundane conversations to demonstrate the normalcy of our marriage. I sat at my kitchen table late into the night, reading through old texts, reliving moments I had long forgotten. There were birthday messages, inside jokes, weekend plans, silly arguments about what to eat for dinner. They weren't the evidence of an abusive marriage. They were the diary of a relationship that slowly eroded under pressure he created. Finally, the hearing arrived. The courtroom was quiet. The fluorescent lights strangely harsh against the polished wood. Elias's lawyer spoke passionately about power imbalances and coercion, but his words had the flimsy quality of someone trying to inflate a balloon with holes on every side. My attorney responded with methodical precision. She produced the email chain showing Elias had requested recommendations for a lawyer. Then she showed the invoice for the attorney he consulted, 3 full hours reviewing the prenup. Then came the signed document, acknowledging he had reviewed the agreement independently. And finally, the pièce de résistance, the attorney himself testifying via Zoom, calmly explaining that Elias had understood every clause. It took the judge all of 10 minutes. "Motion denied," she said firmly. "The prenuptial agreement is valid." Elias's shoulders slumped like a collapsing tent. His lawyer looked defeated. His mother, seated behind him, inhaled sharply, as though she'd been personally insulted by the ruling. Outside the courtroom, Elias confronted me, his anger now stripped of the confidence he'd carried into mediation. "You planned this," he hissed. "You trapped me. You manipulated me into signing that." I met his eyes without flinching. "No. You signed something you didn't bother to read because you were distracted by wedding decorations. And now you're angry that your negligence has consequences." His mother stepped between us dramatically. "You'll regret this, Sandra. My son chose you when he could have had anyone. You should be grateful." I almost laughed. Grateful to be told I'm not enough. Grateful to be compared to every wealthy couple on Instagram. Grateful to be treated like a stepping stone towards someone else's ego. No. I'm finally grateful that I'm walking away. His mother sputtered. Elias looked ready to explode. My attorney placed a hand on my arm. "We're done here." As we walked to the parking lot, I heard Elias break down in sobs behind me. For a brief moment, a small, fragile part of me felt a flicker of sympathy. Then I remembered the coldness in his eyes the night he told me to step aside. The sympathy evaporated. The prenup ruling should have ended the worst of it, but endings rarely arrive, neatly tied with courtroom decisions. If anything, the judge's ruling pushed Elias into a new stage of desperation, one where logic no longer mattered and dignity became an optional accessory he discarded without hesitation. It started with the finances. While reviewing documents with my attorney, I came across a credit card statement I hadn't looked at in years. Elias and I shared a main joint account, but early in our marriage, I had added him as an authorized user on one of my personal credit cards, meant strictly for emergencies. In truth, I had forgotten the card even existed. The minimum payments were set on auto-pay from our joint account, and with our busy schedules, it simply slipped my mind. But the statement sitting in front of me told a very different story. $15,000 spent over the last 8 months. Not on groceries, not on home repairs, not even on anything remotely necessary. The charges read like a catalog of indulgence: $800, designer shoes, $1, $200, spa weekends, high-end restaurant tabs, boutique, clothing stores, and impulsive purchases at jewelry counters that made my stomach twist. While Elias lectured me about mediocre ambition, he'd been treating himself to luxuries behind my back using a card under my name. My attorney scanned the statement, eyebrows raised. He used this without your consent. He never mentioned it once, I said quietly. These weren't emergencies. He was living above our means and hiding it. She tapped her pen thoughtfully. This debt is marital because the card is yours. But considering he made every charge we can argue, he should be responsible for half of it. Essentially, his settlement would decrease by his share of the debt. A slow realization dawned over me. You're saying the $15,000 can be used to reduce what he gets. Exactly, she said. His portion would be $7,500. A strange, unfamiliar satisfaction curled inside me. Not spite, not cruelty, but justice. Fairness finally stepping into the room after months of being pushed aside. We filed the motion. Predictably, Elias and his attorney reacted like we'd declared war. The email exchange that followed was a masterpiece of indignation with his lawyer, accusing us of pettiness and vindictiveness, claiming the purchases were normal marital expenditures. My attorney responded succinctly. Designer handbags, luxury dinners, and spa retreats are not emergencies, nor were they disclosed. That week, Elias began appearing at places he knew I frequented. Not to talk rationally, just to corner me emotionally. At the grocery store, he walked directly into my path, forcing me to pause. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded, his voice low but seething. "You're trying to destroy me financially." "You destroyed yourself," I said, moving past him. "I'm just cleaning up the mess." Another time at a cafe near my workplace, he approached my table so abruptly, the barista dropped a cup behind the counter. "You can't avoid me forever," Elias said, gripping the back of the chair across from me, as if he expected me to invite him to sit. "We were married 6 years, Sandra. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "It means enough to end it cleanly," I replied. "Stop showing up uninvited. All communication goes through attorneys." "You're being ridiculous," he snapped. "You're punishing me for one comment." I met his eyes steady and calm. It wasn't one comment. It was a truth you've been holding inside you for a long time, waiting for the moment you could weaponize it. "You told me I wasn't enough. Believe it or not, I listened." His face contorted with an emotion I couldn't identify, anger twisted together with something almost like panic. "You're a bastard," he spat loud enough that half the cafe turned toward us. The barista quietly handed me a muffin on the house as Elias stormed out. But nothing compared to the debt hearing. The courtroom felt colder that day, as though the air itself sensed the bitterness settling in. Elias sat beside his attorney arms, crossed stiffly, while mine organized the credit card statements into a neat chronological stack. When the judge asked Elias's lawyer to explain the charges, he launched into an argument about normal marital expenses. My attorney waited patiently for him to finish before presenting the statements. "Your Honor," she began, "I would like to highlight a few examples of what Mr. Hale considers normal marital expenses." She read aloud charges from luxury boutiques, $400 dinners, $1, $200 spa packages, and impulsive high-end purchases. These were not agreed upon, disclosed, or used for household necessities. They were discretionary, personal indulgences. The judge turned to me. "Ms. Baker, were you aware of these expenditures?" "No, Your Honor," I said. "I added him to the card years ago for emergencies and forgot about it. The payments were automated, so I had no idea he had been using it." "And you're requesting that he be responsible for half of the debt?" "Yes. Since he made all the charges, I believe it's fair he shares responsibility." The judge nodded and looked at Elias's lawyer. "Does your client dispute making these charges?" There was a moment of hesitation before the lawyer said quietly, "No." "Then half the debt, $7,500, will be deducted from his settlement." The blow landed visibly. Elias's mouth fell open. "This is theft," he shouted. "She's stealing from me." "Sit down," the judge said firmly, eyes narrowing, "or I will hold you in contempt." He sat, chest rising and falling with angry, uneven breaths. When the final numbers were announced, his settlement reduced from approximately $165,000 to $157,500. Elias looked as though the ground had dropped from beneath him. It wasn't just the money, it was the symbolism. He had built his self-worth on the illusion of superiority, and now he was leaving the marriage with far less than he'd expected. As we exited the courthouse, he followed me into the hallway. "You'll regret every part of this," he hissed. "You think you've won, but you haven't." I turned to face him, fully feeling a calm I hadn't felt in months. "There is no winning here, Elias. There's only surviving a life with you and finally stepping into one without you." His expression flickered defiance, then sadness, then something hollow. I walked past him and didn't look back. The divorce was no longer a battle. It was an ending he couldn't escape. The final hearing arrived on a gray Thursday morning, the kind of morning where the sky felt too heavy for daylight. I sat alone at the plaintiff's table, hands folded neatly, listening to the shuffle of papers and muted whispers bouncing off the courtroom walls. My attorney leaned toward me once to say, "This will be quick," but even her reassurance carried the fatigue of months of conflict. Elias arrived minutes later looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. The expensive jacket he wore hung awkwardly on him like he'd lost weight too quickly, or bought a size he couldn't grow into. His mother trailed behind him, eyes sharp with suspicion, as if she believed she was walking into an ambush rather than a legal proceeding. The judge entered, and everyone rose. When we sat again, Elias's attorney made one final attempt to paint him as a victim, this time focusing on the narrative that Elias had sacrificed his career for our marriage and therefore deserved additional compensation. The judge skimmed the documents in front of her, unimpressed. According to the employment history provided, she said Mr. Hale worked part-time retail before and during the marriage. There is no evidence of a professional career abandoned or interrupted. Elias shifted in his seat. I watched the back of his neck flush a deep red, the same shade it used to turn whenever he was embarrassed, but unwilling to admit fault. The judge continued, her tone decisive and unyielding. The prenuptial agreement stands. The calculated settlement of $157, $500 stands. Divorce is granted. The finality of the words echoed through the room. Elias inhaled sharply as if bracing for impact, and his mother muttered, "Ridiculous," under her breath. My attorney began packing our folders, and I felt a softness settle over me. Not joy, not triumph, just closure. Elias rose and approached me before I could leave the courtroom. His eyes glistened, though whether from anger or grief, I couldn't tell. "You didn't have to do this," he whispered. "I would have come around. You never gave me a chance." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the man I married, but the man he had become, one shaped by comparison, envy, and entitlement, so deeply ingrained he no longer recognized it. "I gave you 6 years of chances," I said calmly. "The last one ended the moment you told me to step aside so you could find someone richer." He shook his head. "I didn't mean it. You know I didn't." "Intent doesn't erase truth," I replied. "And the truth is, you believed it. That's enough." His mother stepped between us, then jabbing a finger toward me. "You ruined his life." My attorney appeared at my side, her presence a wall I didn't need but appreciated. "Ma'am," she said firmly, "further confrontation is inappropriate. Please step away." I turned without another word and walked out of the courthouse, feeling the weight of the entire ordeal finally loosen its grip. I moved into a downtown apartment 2 weeks later, half the size of the home Elias and I shared, but light streamed through the living room windows in a way that made the space feel open, airy, honest. I bought new curtains, rearranged the furniture 3 times, and planted small herbs in the kitchen windowsill, basil, thyme, rosemary. It became a ritual I didn't know I needed, waking up to the scent of fresh soil and sunlight. I didn't want the house we'd lived in together. Every room carried echoes of his discontent, the way he'd compared our kitchen to Brian's, the way he'd sighed. When the water pressure in the shower wasn't spa quality, the way he'd complained, the bedroom felt cramped compared to the luxury suites his friends posted online. Selling it felt like shedding a skin that no longer fit. Work stabilized too. My boss and team treated me with a quiet, constant compassion that made me grateful in ways I couldn't articulate. For the first time in months, I felt like I was no longer fighting for air. 3 months after the divorce, I ran into Elias's sister at a restaurant. She pretended not to see me, turning her head so sharply it reminded me of a startled bird. One of the women at her table, though, approached me as I was paying my bill. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I know who you are. I just wanted to tell you. Good for you. He and his family. They're a lot." She hesitated before adding, "His sister is just like him." It wasn't the validation I needed, but it was the validation I got, and it felt strangely grounding. I learned through mutual acquaintances that Elias had moved back in with his mother. He was working full-time at the boutique, now the same one he used to mock for being temporary. Rumor had it he was dating someone new. A woman he boasted came from money. "Good luck to him," one friend said with a shrug. "He'll need it." Another remarked that he still talked about the divorce, constantly insisting he'd been blindsided and financially gutted. I didn't bother correcting the story. People believe the version that makes them comfortable. Let him carry whatever narrative helps him feel whole. One evening, I received a final text message from an unknown number. I knew immediately who it was. His mother. "You ruined his life. He's struggling because of you. I hope you're happy." I stared at the message for a long moment before typing a response. He told me to step aside so he could find someone who could afford him. I stepped aside. He should be thanking me. I blocked the number after hitting send. It was the last thread connecting me to their world and cutting. It felt like exhaling for the first time in a year. Life didn't transform overnight. It didn't become a parade of victories or sudden joys, but it became mine again. I relearned small pleasures, quiet mornings, long walks, nights without conflict or comparison. I relearned my own worth. Sometimes people imagine divorce as a failure. I used to believe that too. But now I understand something far more important. Failure wasn't leaving. Failure would have been staying with a man who measured love by bank statements and self-worth by other people's luxuries. If I gained anything from those difficult months, it was clarity about myself, about what I deserve, and about what I will never allow again. And if there is one truth I want to leave you with, it is this. When someone shows you who you are in their eyes